Hi, and welcome to this Introduction to Biology, the subject at A-level, why I think you should study it and why I think it's one of the best subjects that you can study. So obviously this is a bit different to normal because we're doing this online, so I'm going to try and keep this brief. I'm going to try to explain to you how amazing biology is in only 15 minutes, and apologies if I go over because I probably will. Okay, so first thing I want you to do is think about what do you think about when you think about biology. Maybe if you could say to the screen 5 keywords that you associate with biology. Pause the video and have a go. Okay, I'm interested to see what you thought. Did any of these words come up? A lot of these words we'll be covering in the 2-year course from year 12 and year 13. Some of those words you might be familiar with, like photosynthesis or genetics, and some might seem a little bit foreign. So, for example, something like organelle or potentially even meiosis. So, first thing I want to make clear to you is that biology is a complicated subject. There's a lot of key vocabulary that you're going to have to master, and there's a lot of detail. But that's why it's so fascinating and so interesting for me. So that's just a little caveat before we get started. So at this point in a biology introduction lesson, normally I'd play this really cheesy video, which is called Introduction to Biology HD. It's about 4 minutes long. If you want to watch it, please go ahead. Just enter into YouTube, Introduction to Biology HD. It's got some very cheesy music, but it kind of gets across all the different things that we cover in biology to an extent. The main point being that nowhere in the universe, anywhere else other than Earth, are we aware of life. So the study of life, for me, is the most important thing we can study because there is no life anywhere else in the universe, which, as far as we know, is infinite. So it makes life immensely valuable, which is why I think we should study it. Okay, a little bit more. Biology is an interesting science because compared to the other sciences, it has a wide range. Now you might be familiar with the diagram that you can see in front of me here. It kind of shows scales, powers of 10. If 10 to the 0 is 1 meter, and 10 to the 7 is 10 million meters, we can kind of look at the different scales that we can study, we can observe the world at. So let's start by looking at physics. A fantastic science. I'm not knocking physics, but physics, I feel, focuses itself at the high end of the scale and at the low end of the scale. So in physics, we can study things like atomic particles and subatomic particles, or we can study, stars, the orbit of the Earth around the sun, that sort of thing. We can look at astronomy. We can even look at relativity. Chemistry, we can look at materials and reactions, and of course we can take that to a sort of grander scale when we're looking at like environmental chemistry. But what I like about biology is it encompasses so many different levels. So we can look at the grand scale, we can look at ecology, how the world works, how organisms work together in an ecosystem. We can look at a slightly smaller scale, the scale of a human being, for example, or a cow. And we can look at physiology, the physiology of organisms and plants, so animals and plants, sorry. And then we can go deeper, we can look at the cells, and we can look at biochemistry, that's supposed to say, the biochemistry of cells. We can even look at DNA, individual molecules within a cell. So there is quite a bit of an overlap there between biology and chemistry. So biology encompasses many different things. So potentially, when you're studying biology, some parts you might be like, yeah, this is really me, I love this stuff. And other parts you might think, oh, I'm a bit out of my comfort zone, but hopefully you're going to learn to love all those different parts of biology just like I do. Biology also has great power to address problems. Now, I just scribbled down a few problems that I consider to be problems in the world, and they kind of center around human health and environment. So in human health, we've got things like disease, pandemics, viruses. We've got aging and cancer, which are kind of related to that. And we've got problems to do with human nutrition as well, and also feeding people as well, which kind of links to the environment. And we've also got problems centered around the environment, such as global warming, the crisis in biodiversity and animals going extinct, the struggle to conserve the different animals and species that are out there, and also sort of linked to that is materials and how we can kind of provide materials for our society, but in a sustainable way. And biology has a great power to address all these problems. Hopefully throughout the 2 years, you're going to see how new technologies such as CRISPR and gene editing might be able to help us with some of these things. And we're going to look at all sorts of medical issues, medical technologies, and also kind of the problems facing the wider world. And I think biology, if you are a successful biologist and if you go and study at university, hopefully I would love you to be sort of tackling some of these problems in your future careers. Okay, so now let's get into a little bit more sort of detail. So we're going to start with an introduction to cells. And the learning outcome sort of for this little introduction is to appreciate the size and the number of cells in the human body, and also to introduce to you your summer homework task. So here's a couple starter questions for you to do. Scribble these answers down on a piece of paper, just some numbers. I don't expect you to know these. I can't want you to guess. I want you to estimate, which is a key skill that you need to have in biology. So off you go, pause the video, I'll come back to you in a second. Okay, so first of all, an average cell. An average cell, well, it kind of depends on the type of cell, really. Here's a scale bar here, and an average animal cell is about 20 micrometers. So 1 micrometer is 1,000th of a millimeter. So 20 micrometers is 20 thousandths of a millimeter, which means you could fit 50 animal cells in the space of a millimeter. Okay, that's an average animal cell. Plant cells are a bit bigger, up to 100 microns. They are here. So that means you could fit 10 plant cells in the space of a millimeter. An onion cell, which I presume you've looked at GCSE or Key Stage 3, that's about, it's actually even a little bit bigger than that. I think it's almost up to about 200 micrometers for an onion cell. Okay. Smallest cell. The smallest cell is a type of bacterial cell, and it's about 0.2 microns. It's 200 nanometers. And this is tiny even for a bacteria. And this is actually a type of bacteria that lives inside of another cell. So it's a parasitic bacterium. There's a few of this sort of type of bacteria that they actually go inside of the cells and kind of hide in there, which is a bit strange for bacteria because mostly they live outside of other cells. Viruses are the ones that typically invade other cells. What about big cells? Well, this green blob over here, and that's a really big cell, it's a type of algae sort of thing, and it is, I lost how actual big it is. I think it's about, 5 centimeters. So it's a bubble algae, it's about 5 centimeters across. Yeah, and it's technically one cell. Well, here's another one. Giant squid axon. What's an axon? Well, it's a nerve cell. So the cells, specific cells in a giant squid, are about 1 millimeter wide, but can be up to 13 millimeters long. Because giant squids are massive. And in fact, there's even a bigger squid than that. It's called a colossal squid. It's just slightly bigger than the giant squid. So that cells can be quite large too. What about cells in the human body? Well, there's many different types. So lots of these different types of cells and structures we're going to study in A-level biology. So in fact, we will study the heart, the liver, the kidneys, and we study also, we don't look at reproductive systems in detail, but we also look at things like meiosis and fertilization and how they work. So we are going to look at all these different types of cells. And in fact, there are around about 200 different types of cells in an adult human. We don't look at all of them, actually. Now, they all have the same DNA, but they are different because they have different genes turned on and off. We also look at how that works. How does a cell turn on or turn off genes, and how is that controlled? The number of cells in a human, it's a bit contentious. We're not really sure. But estimates vary from about 20 to 100 trillion, and the most recent things I've seen have said around about 30 trillion. 30 trillion cells. When I say it like that, you may not even be able to really imagine what that means, but that's this many, okay? So it's a million times another million, okay? A million. 30 million cells, yeah, that's a lot of cells. So how big are cells? Well, I've told you already, but now let's look at a kind of interactive zooming in, okay? So I'm just going to go to my interactive. Where is it? Here it is. And let's have a look. So here's a coffee bean. Here is a grain of rice. And here is some A4 paper with some printed writing on it. So we can zoom in. Okay, we can zoom in past the coffee bean, past the sesame seed there. And then we can start, there's a grain of salt, and there, that's a pretty big cell there. That's an amoeba. It's about 500 micrometers across, which is massive for a cell. Here are some other cells. We've got a human egg cell, paramecium, that's another type of protist, swims about in ponds. So this is the kind of realm of the cell. So we've got a skin cell there, 30 microns, a sperm cell. This is a cell from a human eye, a photoreceptor cell. Red blood cell, you're probably familiar with that. Inside of cells, we're starting to get into the realms of DNA. This is a chromosome, the bigger chromosome that we have, the X chromosome, which is a bundle of DNA. If we go closer, we start to see other types of smaller cells. Bacterial cell, this is a bacteria cell, and this is a yeast cell. We can go even smaller than that, and we can start to see things called organelles. So an organelle is a part of a cell. So you wouldn't find this mitochondria on its own, but it would be inside a cell, and you know what it does, hopefully from GCSE. Can you remember? Yeah, that's right, aerobic respiration. So these are inside cells. We can zoom in even more, and now we're getting into the realms of viruses. You can see those viruses coming into view there. HIV, influenza virus, coronavirus would be a similar size, rhinoviruses, hepatitis viruses, and so on. We go in even further. We're still in the realms of biology here. Ribosomes, these are things that are important in cells. Antibodies, this is part of the immune system. Hemoglobin that carries oxygen around the body, and things like phospholipids and tRNA we will look at over the 2-year course. We're zooming in here, we're getting into the realms of biological molecules like glucose and adenine. We do study those. And as we go beyond, this is where we're starting to get into kind of chemistry and physics, okay? So that's a carbon atom there. I'll zoom out there, it's taking us back through the realm of molecules, out to organelles and viruses, out to bacterial cells, and larger sort of animal cells and then plant cells, and all the way back to the scale of coffee beans. Okay, so that's just another thing to kind of reinforce what a cell is and how big it is. All right, let's go back to my presentation. So, setting you up now for your task that I'd like you to do over the summer holidays. So there's a cell on the left. That's a cell at GCSE. Now, you may be getting a sort of an idea that actually cells are a bit more complicated than this diagram. That's an animal cell at GCSE. There is an animal cell at AS level and A level, okay? So it's really complicated. There's a lot of stuff going on inside a cell. There's a lot of different parts of a cell, and we call these things organelles. They're a little bit like an organ in the body, like a heart, liver, kidney, that sort of thing in the body, each doing a different function. Similarly, inside a cell, we have organelles that do certain functions, okay? So I'll skip straight ahead to your summer task, actually. So your summer task is to produce an A4 diagram, pencil drawing of a cell, similar to this, with all the organelles labelled. And you have to say also what the job of each organelle is, okay? I'm going to give you a bit more detail on this later, but in essence, that's what I would like you to do. So, it's difficult to really conceive of how a cell is so complicated. So I am now going to show you one of my most favourite biology videos. It's called The Inner Life of a Cell. It's produced by Harvard University a couple of years ago. And of course it's computer animated, but it represents all the study and science that we know about cells, like what's going on inside them. So it's kind of a film showing what a cell going about its daily business. And actually what's going on in this video is a response to a scratch, okay? So I'm not going to scratch myself hard, don't worry, I'm not going to hurt myself. But if I was to scratch my skin like that, just my fingernail, it will, over the next few minutes, go a teeny bit red. Just a teeny bit red, nothing serious. And what's going on there is basically my body has detected that I've just made a tiny little bit of damage in my skin. And then white blood cells are going to go to that area just to kind of investigate, have a look around, see if there's any more serious damage. Once they've realised there's not a lot of damage, they're just going to go about their business again. But that swelling, that slight redness that will appear is called inflammation. So let's look at this thing. I've talked too much already. So if you want to look at it, Google it. It's called The Inner Workings of a Cell. And there's also a detailed version. It's like 8 minutes long, but I'm going to show you a shorter version. Okay, so let's watch that. The Inner Life of the Cell. Here we go. Okay, I missed the start, so I'm going to tell you what's going on. Here we have white blood cells. They're rolling inside a capillary. Those are red blood cells whooshing past. Now the white blood cell is rolling along the inside of the capillary and it becomes sticky because of these proteins kind of locking together like this. These proteins that lock together have to be put there. So now we're going into a cell. We're looking at the reactions that cause the proteins to be put onto the cell surface membrane to make this stickiness. We're diving into the cell. These little crisscrossy things are called the cytoskeleton. They give the cell structure and shape. We're diving down in through the cytoskeleton. We're heading towards the center of the cell. The nucleus is going to appear in the distance. This is building the cytoskeleton. This is something called polymerization of an actin filament, which is all these little proteins locking together. And we can also break down the cytoskeleton with that little enzyme there, breaking it apart. That's a microtubule forming, and that is a microtubule being broken down. Now microtubules are little highways. This is called a motor protein, and it's carrying a little packet by walking along a microtubule. So this is how things are transported within a cell. Over on the right there is a mitochondria. And we can see all these microtubules leading to the nucleus. That's the nucleus, okay? Those little tiny strings coming out are something called messenger RNA. And they're the recipes for proteins. So these green blobs attaching is a ribosome. And the recipe for the protein is read by the ribosome, and the protein is made. So those are the proteins made by that ribosome, and these ones are going off to a mitochondria. There's a mitochondria in the distance. There's more of these ribosomes making proteins. Now some proteins need to go to the special organelle called a Golgi apparatus, which we see in the distance there. The Golgi apparatus packages proteins into these little blobs. There's the Golgi apparatus. Looks a bit like a weird jellyfish type thing. So each blob there is a little bundle of proteins. And there's the bundle of proteins that have been made by the ribosomes reaching the surface of the cell. So new proteins go onto the surface of the cell, and it's these proteins that cause that stickiness. This is the stickiness, remember, that's allowing a white blood cell to stick to the surface of a capillary and to investigate damage in an area. So there's that white blood cell rolling along the surface of the capillary. It sticks, and then it will actually crawl out of the capillary, squeezes out of the gaps between two capillary cells in the wall of the capillary, and that's how the white blood cells have gone to investigate the damage in that area. So all that is going on in the bit of the skin that I scratched a little bit. Right now, probably in a similar time frame, and the white blood cells will soon realize that there's not much going on. And will go back to their sort of patrol. So, isn't that amazing? Cells are so complicated and so fascinating, and that's what I'm going to ask you to study a little bit over the holidays. A couple of other pictures just to really get you as hooked as I am about this. So here's some microscopy done with something called fluorescence microscopy. Here's the nerves and blood vessels highlighted with different colours in a mouse's ear skin. I'm not sure which is which there. Let's say that the blood vessels are probably pink and the nerves are probably, I think it's the other way around. Blood vessels, I'd say, probably green and nerves probably pink there. Here is a fluorescence microscope picture of a mouse colon. That's a large intestine. So this is like the barrier of the mouse intestine. This is inside the mouse intestine cells. And all these little dots over here are the bacteria, the microbes in its intestine. So each little dot is a different type of microbe. There's millions of microbes in you right now. I wanted to throw in a picture just to remind you that biology isn't all about cells. Here's something else I'm very excited about. Ecology. So this is a picture of a beaver being reintroduced in the UK, in Devon. And I just wanted to remind you that in biology we also look at like how the introduction of one species, for example a beaver, can affect the whole ecology of an area and even reduce the risk of flooding for people downstream. Right, let's move on to your A-level biology preparation summer homework. I would like you to produce a large and detailed pencil drawing of an animal cell. It should take up a whole page of A4, and it should have labels for the organelles listed right here, from nucleus all the way to microtubules. And, in addition, For each of the organelles listed below, I need you to complete a smaller but detailed drawing of that organelle with some information on the structure and function. So that includes a detailed drawing of the nucleus, which is the nuclear pore, the envelope, and the nucleolus within. Also the Golgi body and the mitochondria. Okay, so that is your summer homework. It's going to take around about 3 pages of A4 minimum. It could take more. Okay, so drawings and explanations. That will be collected on the first day in September. Okay, so that was biology, an introduction to the subject at A level. If you'd like to do any more of this sort of thing, then I'm just going to briefly show you. I've got a YouTube channel where I've been putting biology stuff on during this period of lockdown. So if you want to know a bit more about what's going on in Year 12, why don't you watch any one of these mind map videos that I've got. So that's Mr. Murray YouTube channel. So for example, you could have a look at, if you wanted to, cells mind map. Okay, so this is a revision video that I've done for my Year 12 students already, because they've already covered all the cells. But if you wanted to get a sort of advanced view of what it's like, then you could watch that if you wanted to. Also, I'd recommend for a not on the syllabus but an interesting kind of new frontier in biology, have a look at this one, The Future of Food, Does It Look Tasty? All right, I hope that's been helpful for you, and I hope to see you in September. Bye-bye.